Ladies and gentlemen, our next presentation on Warriors Corner will be from U.S. Army Europe Africa, U.S. and international effort to train Ukraine's military.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Brigadier General Mason Stalker, and I'm the Deputy Commanding General Training for Security Assistance Group Ukraine. And on behalf of my commander, Lieutenant General Tony Aguda, who sends his regards to everyone but couldn't be here today, it is indeed my pleasure to be here at Warriors Corner at this great forum to discuss an important topic, which is the United States and coalition training and equipping of Ukraine's military. I'm actually joined by some distinguished colleagues here already. In the front, you'll see Sergeant Major Garner, who is the SAG-U Command Sergeant Major. And Sergeant Major Garner has been to almost every European training site visiting coalition training. I've also got two great, fine United States officers with me. Colonel Harris, who's the 2nd Armored Brigade Team Commander, who's going to talk a little bit about tank training. And then Lieutenant Colonel Seth Barrett, Commander for 3-2 Air Defense Artillery Battalion, who's going to discuss U.S. Patriot training. Ladies and gentlemen, I think some of you are familiar with SAG-U, but SAG-U was established by the United States in November 2022 in response to Russia's illegal, unjustified, unprovoked, and ongoing aggression in Ukraine. The wonderful thing about SAG-U is it's not one nation, it's multinational. It's had more than 50 nations have participated in one form or another in SAG-U. It's responsible for full spectrum security assistance operations, including coordinating sustainment, coordinating training, and indeed advising our Ukrainian partners as they fight for their freedom and territorial integrity. I'll spend a few minutes talking first about training and then about our sustaining efforts in the next slides. Next slide, please. Success on the battlefield depends on the quality of training. Ladies and gentlemen, these are not my words. Indeed, these are the Deputy Sergeant Major of the Ukraine Army's words at our last joint training conference. He spoke to the coalition, which had about 150 people joined together to work on unity of training effort, and said those very words. And the successes that we've seen on the Ukrainian battlefield are a testament to the courage, indeed to the professional competence of the Ukrainian soldiers. But as the Deputy Sergeant Major said, and believes, there's also a factor of the quality of training provided by the many nations represented in the coalition, a lot who are here at this very conference. Next slide. I think we'll all agree that it is no easy feat to rapidly train and integrate complex weapon systems with many different ammunition and indeed capabilities. Ladies and gentlemen, the coalition is indeed delivering. Last week, I was visiting training with our partner, and I'm working with their leadership to synchronize and coordinate their requirements. And what I saw was spectacular. I saw members of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, recruits, specialists, leaders, proud, grateful, and mission-focused. And I also saw the many weapon systems that the international community has provided and continues to provide complement their arsenal. But a piece of equipment without a competent operator will not give the advantage that is required for Ukraine to fight and win. Understanding how to operate, how to integrate, how to maintain, and how to integrate combined arms maneuver with that piece of equipment is where that advantage is created. I'm very proud to tell you, if you look up on the slide, that over 89,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been trained since the 24th of February outside of Ukraine. Of course, indeed, there is much training going on inside Ukraine, but just under 90,000 soldiers have been trained by the coalition. This is absolutely remarkable. I had a quick call with the team back in Europe this morning, and they reminded me of the gravity and the scale of our training. Today, on the 10th of October, across Europe, there's 7,254 Ukrainians participating in training right now. To help quantify this enormous effort, obviously depicted on the slide, over the course of the last 593 days, over 88 training sites have been used to deliver training to our Ukrainian partners across not just Europe, but North America. The coalition has trained 17 Ukrainian brigades, and we're now focused on the reconstitution of a number of brigades as we head in to the winter. So what training is provided? Well, first of all, SAGU doesn't provide any training. We synchronize and coordinate training that is provided by the coalition. Right now, there are 25 nations participating in training Ukrainian armed forces. The training that we coordinate, leaders, recruits, specialists, ranges from company commanders, platoon leaders, squad and section commanders, indeed specialists such as combat medic, maintainers, crew members for donated equipment, importantly, maintenance training. And of course, this all culminates in collective training where we focus on combined arms maneuver. This training assistance is informed by the UAF's priorities. Indeed, we do not dictate what training we conduct. The Ukrainians do. And they have what they call the UAF's training North Star. And that dictates their training priorities to the coalition by line of effort. This comprises a joint approach because it is not only about the land domain. The maritime domain, the air domain, and indeed marine are important elements to combined arms maneuver. Importantly, we continue to calibrate the size and scope of our training. We have many partners. You have likely heard of the European Union Military Assistance Mission, who we coordinate with on a daily basis. There are 5 liaison officers from the EU's training mission inside SAGU, and we have liaison officers in their headquarters in Brussels. Notably, this high-level synchronization of training requirements occurs on a regular basis at what we call joint training conferences. We're actually going to have our 6th joint training conference, which brings the coalition together in the first weeks of December. And at this conference, at this signature training event, the Ukrainians will tell us what their priorities are and what their demands are. Next slide, please. Moving on to the sustain line of operation for SAGU. The heart of SAGU's sustain efforts are indeed the International Donor Coordination Center, or the IDCC. Led by the United Kingdom, the IDCC is also a multinational organization co-located with Security Assistance Group Ukraine. The IDCC coordinates resources contributed by the coalition to provide aid to the armed forces of Ukraine. And folks, where I think the IDCC provides tremendous value is in their holistic approach to donations. And indeed, we actually have a former Deputy Commanding General of Support in the audience today, but I won't point him out. However, if the current Deputy Commanding General of Support of SAGU was here, my good friend, she would say, it is the importance of the capability approach that adds value. i.e., what do we mean by the capability approach? The detailed work to consider the totality of a donation rather than just look at a platform by itself. Her team works tirelessly to understand what is required to support and field a particular donation, and also where other resources, if not donated, could be drawn from. In some cases, one nation will donate a platform, but there are other resources required, such as fuel, ammunition, etc. A good example would be a towed howitzer, a nation donating a howitzer, but still requires a vehicle to move it, fuel, ammunition, and other spare parts. The goal of SAGU and the IDCC is to transform a donated piece of equipment, or a kit, as we would say in the infantry, into a military capability. Next slide. So, ladies and gentlemen, a few things that I wanted to highlight before handing over to my colleagues. More than 50 countries have provided support, coordinated and synchronized through the SAGU since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. SAGU is a multinational joint headquarters coordinating and synchronizing this important assistance. We have been purpose-built and we are evolving to continue to meet the needs of our Ukrainian partners. And taking quality equipment donated by the countries, some of them in this room, and coupling it with quality training provided by the women and men of the coalition's armed forces is indeed the end state. What I can tell you without getting into operations is the bulk of Western equipment and Western trained folks have been featured by our Ukrainian partners in key combat areas. Before I hand over to Colonel Harris, I just wanted to note that we will continue to support Ukraine with the means to deter and defend itself against further aggression. SAG-U will continue our security assistance activities, and we will continue to be respectful of the Ukrainian sovereignty, and they indeed make their own operational decisions. Finally, I am so honored to be part of such a very important mission and a very important joint headquarters. Frankly, there's no place I would rather be. I thank you for your time and attention. Slava Ukraini, together to victory, and I leave you with a short video.
Hey, good morning. My name's Brian Harris. I'm the commander for 2nd Brigade, 1st Infantry Division, Big Red 1 out of Fort Riley. We've been home for about 2 months now, and prior to that, we were deployed as part of the rotational brigade to Europe, where we started off in December of 2022 on NATO's eastern flank. And over the last 8 months, while we were over there, my team led the efforts to train the Ukrainians in combined arms maneuver. I got the call on Christmas Day. I was up in Drosko-Pomorsky training area serving Christmas dinner to a couple battalions. And I was told to get my cavalry squadron ready and get them down to Grafenwehr ASAP. And within 24 hours, they were moving out to Grafenwehr, about 7 hours away. And by 15 January, we were training our first Ukrainian battalion on the Bradley fighting vehicle. And over the course of our deployment, we trained 4 brigades, 1 Bradley brigade, one Stryker brigade with the help of 2 CR, and 2 light infantry brigades in combined arms maneuver, all the way up through combined arms live fire, day and night. And at the end of our deployment, we conducted the M1A1 tank training. Next slide, please. But we trained 9,000 Ukrainian soldiers, and it was definitely an honor for my team. We learned a lot of repetitions in squad live fire, a lot of repetitions in Bradley crew gunnery, in tank crew gunnery, that my team, my leaders were allowed to observe. The program of instruction, we started off, some of them have never seen a Bradley before in their life. We started off teaching them basic operator level tasks, how to operate the Bradley, how to drive the Bradley, how to shoot the Bradley, how to maintain the Bradley. And then we slowly progressed over 5 weeks in some cases and 12 weeks for the tank combined arms live fire program of instruction that you can see behind me. But they were hungry. They were in those simulators all day and all night learning how to operate the Bushmaster on the Bradley fighting vehicle. Same thing with the M1A1. They're in there learning the switchology, practicing their fire commands. We took them out to the ranges at Grafenwehr. They went through basic tables just like a U.S. tank crew would go through. We scored them. Not in the same standard that the U.S. Crew members would receive, but we scored them. We gave them feedback. We gave them after-action reviews on how they performed during their tank run, during their Bradley run. Once they were done gaining confidence at the crew level, they proceeded up to the platoon level. and we did it all over again. They learned how to control and distribute fires. They learned how to fight their platoon in an offensive and defensive manner, day and night. And then they moved up to the company level CalFEX, and my brigade staff covered down on multiple company level CalFEXs while we were there. Bradley's, the Strikers, and then we culminated with the tank battalion CalFEX day and night. It was truly a highlight of my career to see that. From what I saw, ladies and gentlemen, they absolutely were lethal. They could hit what they were shooting at. They were highly motivated, and they were hungry to learn. And they asked my team a lot of questions. We had a lot of manuals translated into Ukrainian that we gave to them so they could continue to train once they returned to home station. And we during the company level CalFEX, I led them through the AAR process, the after action review process, and they all signed up for 3 things to fix that echelon once they get back to Ukraine, so that they can continue to grow. So what was different about this training was, up to that point in December of 2022, it was all platform training, how to operate this platform, how to operate this weapon system. But in January, we started combined arms maneuver training. And when we executed that first Bradley company level CalFEX, there were Ukrainian crew members on Paladins supporting Bradley maneuver manned by Ukrainian crew members. And it was a sight to see. My team was truly honored to be a part of that. It's a highlight of my 25-year career. And after Seth is done talking about his team training the folks on Patriots, I look forward to fielding your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, General Stalker, for that overview of the coalition efforts to train Ukrainians, and Colonel Harris for your work in combined arms maneuver. Good morning, everybody. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Seth Barrett, and I serve as the commander for 3-6 ADA. Earlier this year, my battalion had the distinguished pleasure of training 74 Ukrainian soldiers on Patriot battery operations at Fort Sill. We did this over 10 weeks and 6 days a week, 10 hours a day. The first thing I want to highlight for everybody is the Ukrainian soldiers we received were not like the traditional AIT soldiers we train at Fort Sill. They were highly experienced. We had several operators that had dozens of engagements on the S-300 system. Their pre-existing ADA skills. Oh, I'm sorry, next slide. I'm getting the sign from the front row. Their fundamentals in air defense were way higher than we normally get in the air defense schoolhouse. We train new soldiers. These Ukrainians were highly, highly experienced. They'd been fighting Russians for about a year. We only had about 4 weeks to put together a training plan for these Ukrainians, and we did it a little different than we would normally train AIT soldiers. When I train AIT soldiers, I normally teach them what to do and how to do it our way. Our end state for the Ukrainians was not just training, but education. Training them how things work, why we do things, so when they got this system, they could go out and make their own decisions and assume their own risk level. Another thing that really helped us out is at Fort Sill, we have probably the greatest environment in which to train air defenders in the entire world. I have more TADs or training devices at my disposal than anywhere else in the world. I have the world's only radar maintenance simulators where I can literally put together an infinite number of radar and maintenance vaults to train our maintainers on. Also, the community at Fort Sill is phenomenal. We have a lot of retirees, we have a lot of experience from as far back as the Gulf War that were able to help us train these soldiers in how things work and why we do things. Also, as training got underway, like we all do, no plan survives first contact. So it was a two-way street. We pulled a lot of information from them, we listened to how they wanted the training to be, and we tailored it to that. It really was a two-way dialogue. Another thing I'd like to talk about is our linguists. We would not have had the success in our training if it were not for the linguist. It would have been 10 weeks of charades had we not had the linguist. Truly a Herculean effort by the linguist community. We had soldiers of Ukrainian background that re-enlisted. They were going to get out of the Army and they re-enlisted to come help with that mission. So we just had an immense amount of support from the linguist community. In conclusion, training Ukrainian soldiers on the only system that's ever defeated a hypersonic threat in the world was one of the greatest honors of my career. As we sent these Ukrainian soldiers out to the battlefield, it was not lost on me the monumental task ahead of them to protect their units and their country on the front line, critical nation infrastructure and their civilians. We'll now take your questions.
Hi, thank you so much for doing this. My name is Brian Harris with Defense News. So it's an open question as to whether Congress will keep allocating funds for the Support Ukraine efforts. I'm wondering if that has any bearing on SAG-U's activities. Will you be able to proceed with a lot of this training going forward, even if you don't have those funds? Thank you.
So I think one of the most important things I said is there's 50 nations that have contributed to the support and the training in SAG-U. So SAG-U is not one nation, and so we're not going to comment on bilateral or individual nations' policy decisions and how they will potentially affect the future. But what I can say is that SAG-U has got over 25 nations in it right now, and we are continuing to coordinate the delivery of equipment that's been donated. And indeed, as I mentioned, 7,254 people training today. And I think that is a monumental effort with now just under 90,000 soldiers trained by all of the nations that are represented here, plus more. And so policy decisions may affect future operations. We won't speculate on that, but right now the SAG-U's center of gravity is unity. And what I can say is I don't think I've ever been part of something where this unity of effort from a coalition of this size has ever been so tremendous.
Hey, Sam Scove, Defense One. So when we talk about the combined arms training, for example, we're also probably, I assume, learning a lot from the Ukrainians. A lot of the people going in have some combat experience. They're experienced using drones, technologies, things like that. So I was wondering if you could talk about the things that we're learning maybe from them.
I'll share some personal observations, sir. Good question. They have a lot of drones. Like every squad has their own drone. So we have a machine gun in every squad. They have a machine gun in every squad. They have a drone. They take pride in. It's almost like an extra duty for them. So you might have a machine gunner, you might have a tank gunner, and then they showed me a couple videos of their exploits on the battlefield. And it's an extra duty, another skill set, and I've shared my opinion with some of the senior leaders across the Army, but they have a lot of drones. The brigade commander, for example, has had 9 or so TVs in the back of his command vehicle, and they were all drones. I have 4. I'm a brigade commander. I have 4, and they have 9, and it is prevalent across that battlefield. From what I've seen, from talking to some folks, and from a lot of open source. You can see it on open source, sir. So that's a one point that I would share with you, and then just the fundamentals. What my soldiers saw, coaching and teaching them, was how important the fundamentals are with knowing how to operate the 25 millimeter Bushmaster, how to bore sight the tank. They saw how important that was to the Ukrainians and their accuracy on the gunnery tables. And those young soldiers that just joined my team, they saw that. It was invaluable.
Hi, over here, Andrew Dravinga. Armada International. It was a question really on how Ukraine is going to sustain recruitment. Obviously they've had a lot of casualties, and they're going through professionally qualified people as well. So how does that recruitment from civilian work, and is there pressure to get more people that just aren't there? Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that question, but unfortunately that is internal to Ukraine, and I don't have any information on how they're actually addressing their recruitment problems or indeed recruitment success. Because what we can say is the demand signal that they've asked the coalition to do, the coalition has actually far exceeded that in recruits. So there's recruit training ongoing right now in about approximately 13 different nations. Indeed, I'll speak of the one that the UK is leading, which is Operation Interflex, that 10 nations are part of. And they're producing exactly what the Ukrainians have asked them to produce every month. And as I mentioned, we use these joint training conferences to ensure that we understand, first, their priorities, and second, their requirements. And we have not fallen short as an international community on meeting the requirement they've set out for training outside of Ukraine.
Hello, Christopher Woody from Business Insider. Colonel Harris, you mentioned the varying levels of experience that Ukrainians had training on armor. I wanted to ask, among the Ukrainians with experience in Soviet-era tanks and Soviet-era armored vehicles, how much of that experience was compatible with the vehicles they were training on with you? Were there things they had to unlearn and then relearn, or did they have a leg up, or how did that work?
Thanks for the question. Those folks that showed up to the training with experience, there's some fundamentals that don't change between platforms. There's a different switchology, like if you're riding in a different car, but the fundamentals of tank gunnery were applicable whether you're on a Soviet platform or a U.S. platform. Bore sighting, for example, that is something that carries over across combat platforms. Those folks that had experience, they had more experience on the radio. They knew how to communicate a little better across their platoon net. So they came armed with some experience from their time in Ukraine, and there were a lot of veterans that were showing up for this training.
So, sir, from an air defense perspective, same thing. Some of the fundamentals of air defense don't change. One thing we did learn is the Soviet systems tend to be a lot more user involved. I'll give you an example. An S-300 has 84 different cables that you have to plug in. We have 5. So a lot of the functions or engagements on a Soviet system, there's a lot of user in the loop. A lot of our processes are automated or take less switch actions to do. So fundamentals are the same, but the equipment, the nuance of the equipment changes.
Good morning, gentlemen. Matt Kelleher from HQDA G8 Force Development. I wonder if you can talk about any of the specific synthetic training environment material systems other than the weapon systems themselves that might be really helpful in your training with the Ukrainians. Thank you.
Sir, thanks for the question. They use some of the warfighting simulation systems that we do to help train the battle staff. It was truly a team effort down there. We had elements from 7th ATC, JMRC, 2CR. We all came together for a big battle staff exercise, so they were able to use some of those simulations that were available down there in Bavaria. Is one of the examples that I've seen. Any thoughts from your
Yeah, sir, like I talked, we have a tremendous simulation and virtual capability at Fort Sill. And we took a couple days and taught them how to script air battles so they could, based on their experience and how they saw threat behavior, they could script a scenario to challenge their crew members how they saw fit. So it was, we have a tremendous sim capability. We have a radar simulator where I can inject faults, and I have no I have no risk to equipment. I have no risk to operator. It doesn't put out 55,000 volts. It puts out like 5. So I can really get in depth and layer faults. That was probably the best thing we had available at Fort Sill for that mission.
Good morning. Thank you for your service. How can industry help more? Michael Weigert from Lucos Small Business in Tampa. We're on an IDIQ out of PEO Stride in Orlando, ETSC, International Training Contract, Service Training Contract. How can we help you more? Because I'm not seeing a lot come our way or come to use this vehicle.
No, thank you for that question. So obviously the donations and the training are pushed by individual nations. So it actually has to be through individual nations to get inside. So the requirements are clear. We will absolutely always publish what the requirements are vis-a-vis equipment and sustainment and indeed maintenance training. And individual nations pick those up as we synchronize and coordinate them. On the training side, there's obviously a lot of innovative tools that can be used in training, but nations have to first request and then offer that training. Just to pile on a couple questions about lessons learned and how do we share synthetic environments, etc. We're seeing a lot of thirst by our Ukrainian partners to use those environments where they can, particularly outside of Ukraine. And what I can say, just to give an outside the U.S. perspective, every nation that is conducting either battalion, brigade, or indeed higher headquarters staff training is doing so in part or with totality of a synthetic environment to help simulate that. And our Ukrainian partners have also realized where they don't have those tools, they can still start to build that muscle memory and reinforce those first principles that some of us have talked about. And they do so through the rock drill. They have really, really focused from squad all the way up to indeed corps level that they will conduct a rock drill for everything they do to reinforce those first principles, those action on drills. And I think, somebody said, what is a common theme I think we're hearing? It's back to basics. It's principle-based training.
And just almost to follow up with that, when it comes to leadership, the invasion kind of caught Ukraine mid-NATO transformation. So you have the NCO Corps was still developing, higher leadership was still developing. So I was wondering if you could talk about any of the challenges in terms of the educational process and how that's developing even now. Thanks.
Great question, sir. Thank you. In Germany, we had a couple of classes that were offered to the Ukrainians. We had a basic leaders course for their mid-level leaders. We had some battle staff training to teach, how to solve some of the complex problems on the battlefield, the military decision-making process. They went through multiple classes over our 8 months of training them, sir, went through that training. They had multiple leadership schools. And I know that as we left, they were continuing to send mid-level leaders to Grafenwehr to get that training from the team there delivering the training for the Ukrainians. And it is ongoing. I don't think it's going to stop.
Hey, sir, great question. And I wanted to maybe examine the other side of that equation. Is we learned a lot from their leadership. Probably the biggest thing we took away is we got some very intelligent, very experienced, very knowledgeable NCOs. And so as we look around this conference today, there are infinite number of systems that might show up in the U.S. Army Air Defense Branch. So the question we ask is, how do we get our NCOs and our leaders to be able to take any system that might be in this building, right, and in 10 weeks in a foreign language, go out and just start slaying cruise missiles? So we can't do maybe we can, but we can't do a whole lot about the experience, but really ramping up the intensity of our professional military education, what we're asking from our NCOs, so we put them in the next 3 to 8 years as these systems come out in a position where they can do exactly that. So it was a lot of lessons we learned from them.
I just wanted to pull on that thread because I think it's really important. And I think how I would highlight answering your question would be the emphasis that our partner has put on leadership training. And so as I mentioned at our joint training conferences, they issue priorities. Their priority for the last 8 months has been leadership training. And inside leadership training, they have prioritized senior NCO and their NCO cadre because they understand the value that that backbone will bring in combat operations. And they've recently just added at the last joint training conference instructors because they know that they need to have professional instructors and a professional instructor corps to help continue this enduring education and training. Ladies and gentlemen, any more questions? Oh, in the back, there we go. Hi, ma'am.
Hi, thank you for this. I'm sure this session is right place for my question, but I don't know if you can comment actually. Turkish-made Bayraktar TB2 UAVs became very popular in the fight against Moscow. Are TB2s still present after the US government announced on October 5 that an American F-16 had shot down a Turkish drone in Syria, if you have up-to-date information on that?
Apologies, ma'am. I don't have any information on that.
Thank you. I guess so. Thanks.
Sir.
All right. Thank you. Dan Allmacher from Jacobs. Question on combined arms training. Based on the Ukrainian counteroffensive and how that's been going in the Zaporizhzhia and Donetsk Oblats, how do you think the next iteration of combined arms training may modify things to adapt to the operational environment to include the significant Russian counter-mobility obstacles and minefields? Thank you.
Sir, great question. I think we focus on the fundamentals of combined arms breaching. I don't think those change. The integration of fires to set the conditions for the breach, those fundamentals will not change. We'll have to talk to our Ukrainian teammates as they share information from their recent experiences. Folks down at JMRC can turn very quickly on adapting to the scenario, but I don't know. I don't know any of the intel coming from the battlefield these days. But we absolutely could feed in to our training scenario anything that the Ukrainian teammates wanted to leverage during their training opportunity.
So I think it's important just to know that obviously we're in step, shoulder to shoulder with our Ukrainian partners, and any training that we design or develop, they're in the room. And so I'll give you an example. So there's some training upcoming where I can't get into the specifics of it. What I can say to you, the planning group took 5 days last week in a nation with at least 20 Ukrainians that came out of Ukraine to help formulate that training so it would be fit for purpose based on their needs. And SAG-U actually has some Ukrainian LNOs that work with us on a day-to-day basis to ensure that we understand their requirements and we have that connective line of communication that remains so vital and open. And we're very grateful for everything that they are doing to support us, and I know they're very grateful for everything you are all doing to support them. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next Warriors Corner presentation, presented by U.S. Army Pacific, NCO role in the Indo-Pacific, will begin at 11:30.